Good morning, and thank you to Wines Australia for the kind invitation. I will talk about music strings. I will not make it too much technical, but I will give you some insight, and then I will talk much more about tension and how the influence of tension. I will talk about response, what is influencing response on the cello, what is the contribution of the string, what you can do to improve the response of the string, sound color, how you produce it, how you can influence the sound color of the instrument. This is always already with the idea of how to optimize the sound. Because what we very often do, and is what I very often see in the music schools, is that the instruments, they are rendered out with a set of strings. And nobody ever made the effort to try out, is this really optimal? Is this really getting out the sound which is supporting the student, the pupil? Is it something that he will love the sound, or is it in reality something that he is rejected from the instrument? And it has to be to love your sound. That's always something is our closest relation when we make music. And it's so important that we feel home, that we feel confident with everything, the instrument reacts in the right way. And we have the musician has a huge impact here, and the strings have an impact, the bow has an impact, the instrument, and I will just come around what we can do to make this, to improve this quality. Let's get into, check, yes. Shortly about how is the string built up, because it's just to give you some understanding, what is a string? I will do it like this. The most important part of the string is the core material. And you know, the music we play, most of them today was created with gut strings. So up to Mahler, everything was gut. All these composers had the sound of gut strings in their ears. So and that's why everything what we do today in a more modern way is related to this understanding of music. So that when we make strings with a modern material, we need the understanding of how gut was sounding. So that's why the core material is very important, but we use, the gut was the traditional one, but we use today polymer materials, that means synthetic materials. We use steel core, you know, for the cellist especially, or the viola player, the A string, it's a steel core, or a rope core is used today as well. Then we have the windings, and the winding was first of all to add weight in order to reduce the diameter of the core. I will show you a picture when we talk about gut strings. I will bring it in a little moment. So this windings, they have to add weight on it. When you have a lower tension, when you have a lower frequency, then you need a higher weight of the strings. That means the A string is the lightest one on the cello, and the C is the most heavy one, or vice versa. The E on the violin is the lightest one, and the G string has most weight. And this is added by this materials, and we use nearly everything what is possible, from polymer materials to silver to aluminium, everything what is available. And important is everything adds sound, everything adds influence to the playability of the string. So that's why it's not just wrapping something around. You have to be very careful what you do. And then what is the next point? When you have the core which is metal, and you wrap metal around, it will sound metallic. But gut was never sounding metallic. So that's why we add in all these interstices, in these cavities, we add something, we call it a damping material. Damping is to get away of these very high overtones, of these very high frequencies, to make the sound warm and round, which it has to be. And then of course the color code, which is just to cover this, what we do during manufacturing. Oh, what is this? This is away. Gut strings. This was, up to the beginning of the 20th century, the only material we used in Europe. In Asia it was silk, but all the composers we have, when you look about classical music, Baroque music, the classic time in Vienna, the Romantic, it was gut. And that's why when you look here, here's already wrapped around. The wrapping of gut was developed approximately in the time when Bach and Handel were born. That means 1675, 85. And here you can see in a very old picture that on the cello here, this musician, he has a silver-bound C string on the cello already. Before, when you calculate gut strings, the C string will be 4 millimeter thick. And this explains, in this former times, the cello was played for basso continuo, and the cello was in front of the body, and then they were walking around. Via the windings, the strings could be thinner, the response was better, and that was the beginning of the solo instruments, of the solo concertos, both for the violin and for the cello. So that's exactly the time, 1685, when this development started. And then, you know, Vivaldi came with all his solo concertos, Bach, Haydn, and all the development we had in the later time. So it depended on this winding technology. Then we had in the beginning of it started in the late 19th century, and it was, of course, you understand me? Do I need the microphone, or is fine? Can I do it like this? Because I can explain better. It was because in the piano building, they developed this high tension steel for the grand pianos. And this development, of course, influenced the bowed strings as well. First was the violin E string. That was the very first trial to use solid steel core. But later then, for all the instruments, I mentioned the cello already, these steel core strings were developed. We have it today for all instruments. Think about the school strings for the violin as well. You can buy them with a solid steel core today. And the art is to make them sounding beautiful and round. And there you can distinguish between quality and I will not call it scrap, but cheaper quality. And when we go to the next technology, what is important when we talk about solid steel core strings, they make a more dense sound. In comparison to gut has a wider sound, it's breathing. And as well, when you play on gut strings, it is not allowed to use very high bow pressure, bow weight, because then the sound is cracking away. When you have steel core strings, you can use lots of bow weight. And this is what is influenced as well as the bowing techniques and as well as this understanding of sound today. And I'm very often sad about it, because when you see these young students playing and they use very heavy bow weight, and they don't use the bow anymore because they only play in very small areas of the bow, but with high weight, and the sound is just tense and tight, and music is about breathing. Yes, it should touch. And that's why I very often had these young students, and they explain to me they feel they have to use this bow weight because otherwise they are not loud enough. But loudness is not equality, it's just one parameter for the music. Yes, and that's something we talked about teaching in the first part. For me, this is very important, that we never forget what music is about. It is to touch. It's to tell stories. When we go to the next technology is a rope core. We have this for the lower cello strings, the C and G, and we use it for the double bass as well as this technology. Reason why is when you have these 6 strings, they get too stiff. And this technology again makes the strings very flexible. And you get much more overtones. And that's why when you go from solid steel core lower strings and go over to these ones, they're more expensive. But then you have a much wider overtone spectrum. You go from a more focused, more dense sound to a much wider sound. And this is so beautiful with this technology. And then when we go over to the synthetic core, this is what we use in the violins and in the viola strings for the most. This is human hair, and this is synthetic material what we use today. And the big problem, as you can see it immediately, human hair as horsehair has this rough structure. Synthetic hair, synthetic material is smooth. That's why it's so difficult to make synthetic bow hair, because it has not this roughness that the bow can attack. And what we use is this, what we call the multifilament. So we bundle these fibers in a bundle, and then we twist it. And this is the core what you have in your violin strings. And when we look at such a string, this is a bundle. You can see it here. I cut the string, and now we look on this area from the cutting. Here is our bundle of these filaments, and then we have a first layer wrapped around, and this is a second layer wrapped around. In this case, is a violin A string. And when it's ready finished, it looks like this, but it still needs this rough surface And then it's a kind of a polishing we use, and this is the surface you really have on your string. So this is how it in reality looks like. It's a violin A string shown here. Now I will talk about tension. I will make it as easy as possible for you, but it is a very important parameter to understand. Tension is influenced by the frequency. Of course, the frequency is given by the instrument. Yes, our notes are given, so we don't change the G, the D, the A. What we can do is we change the pitch frequency. We can go, former times we had 415 hertz for the A's, and we lifted up to 439. Today, the big orchestras, they are on 43 already as a pitch, and that means, of course, when I increase the frequency, I increase the tension. That's the whole reason what the orchestras are doing. When they increase the pitch for the whole orchestra, they increase the tension. And what is the reaction? All the orchestra is getting louder. And this is because our halls are getting bigger and bigger, and people believe that we have to be louder, but the problem is that there is a small risk to go from music to entertainment. And music is not about entertainment itself. This is a different story. It's the music we go for. Yes? So that's why to increase tension is a dangerous way. Then we have the length of the string. And this is of course important when you have an instrument. The viola players, they know this very well. When they have a longer instrument, then the string length, the vibrating length gets longer. This is the vibrating length, this one. And this means when you, it's in a square. Square means always a big impact to the tension. So when your instrument is longer, is a larger model instrument with a larger vibrating length, your tension is much higher. That's why I always tell people when you have a larger instrument, you have to go for lower tension strings. Because people believe the string is longer, now I have to use stronger strings. Now it's opposite. You have to go down in tension because the length is going in a square. Then the diameter is the same. As thicker my diameter is of the string, as more tension do I have. Again the same, as thinner my string, as lower the tension is. And this is only the weight of the string. We measure the tension like this. We hang the string down, and this is the upper night, this is the bridge, and then we can just measure by weight what the tension of the string is. But important is not so much the tension of the string, it's much more what is the pressure via the bridge to the belly. And this is dependent on the angle I have on my strings. When I have a very high bridge and an angle like this, then my resulting force is very high. If I have a like this, a highly tilted, the force to the belly is lower. This is as important as the tension of the strings, as shown here. Yes, when this is the tension what we measure, and depending on the angle when I change this is important. What is my resulting pressure I put on the belly? What is when we increase the tension? It's very popular for the young people especially. They go for the higher tension strings, from soft to medium to the strong. The problem is that of course the instrument gets louder. But the risk is always that I make my instrument very dense, very tight. But music is about breathing. Music is about traveling. Yes, so when you have a very dense sound, it's loud maybe in your close surroundings, but it is not loud in the long range. Yesterday we have been to the concert, and I have been very happy to listen to Renaud Capuçon, because he plays on a very nice Del Gesù violin, but he has only a medium tension on his strings, and he plays this French-Belgian bowing technique. That means long bow strokes and a light bow, not this heavy bow weight. And we have been in the last row, it was nearly the last row in the concert hall, and he has been so present. Yes, and this is a big misunderstanding that people feel when I would like to reach out, I have to push more, to put more weight on. It's a big misunderstanding. This is loud in your direct surroundings, but it is not traveling. Just to explain what is tension, we have the Larsen soft, which is here. And then we increase to the medium, then we have the soloist. Soloist always means a higher tension. But there's again soft, and then we go to the strong. So this is an increase. And the consequences is that we of course increase the bridge pressure, we get a louder sound, often a more fully sound. This is when your instrument sounds very tiny. Then you can benefit of a higher string tension, because a higher string tension amplifies the lower frequencies. It is when you remember your radio, when you have the radio only on a very low volume, you have a very distant sound. But when you increase the volume, suddenly the lower frequencies are amplified and you get a more rounder, a more full-bodied sound. This is the effect of higher tension strings. So when you have a violin, or when your pupil has a violin which is very tiny sounding, you can help this instrument by increasing the tension on this instrument. Of course, you influence the sound characteristics of the other strings. So they are in direct relation to each other. So that's why you have to be very careful when you do it. And what is for me very important is that you can risk to overpower. That's what I mean. When the sound is getting tight and dense, you are too high in tension. You have to go down. It's always about a free sound. It's something that you really feel you can easily develop the sound. Tension has as well to do with how we feel at the fingerboard, with the resistance, how we feel with the resistance bow to the strings. Can we dig in? Some musicians, they love to have a very hard, high resistance, and some musicians, they love it, which is usually typical for gut strings, that the strings are more flexible, that the strings are easier to dig in. This is a matter of taste. Yes, I know musicians of both directions, and I know very wonderful musicians in both lines. I personally prefer the more flexible string, an easier playability at the fingerboards. That's my taste. And as older the instrument is, as more careful you have to be with the tension. And I will just talk shortly about lifetime, because lifetime is so important. But what we forget about, I hope this is not too difficult. This is a load I put on, the stress, and this is a lifetime. And when we think about our instruments today, from the old masters, the Stradivari, the Jesu, all these old Italian instruments, that we keep them so long time, has a lot to do with that the tension in former time was not as high as it is today. When I have this is my load. When I have a low load, yes, my load level is low, then I have a longer lifetime of my instrument. As higher I go up with my load, as lower is getting my lifetime. And this is for the instrument, but it's as well for the string. It's the same. When I have a string with a high tension, I have, of course, a shorter lifetime of my string. As more I stretch, as more I stress my core material, as shorter is the lifetime of the string. And that's what we are doing for high performance strings. When we make strings for the music schools, we design the strings that this material is stretched at a lower level. That means the level is maybe here. So the strings, they will last long, because for the music schools it's very important to have strings which have a very long lifetime. For the soloist, he don't care about years or months. For him it's important he has the very, very best in the performance. So what we do for these strings is we increase the tension or the stress of the material, because as more stress you have, as more beautiful the sound gets for the strings. That's only the tension of the strings I talk now, not for the instrument. So we increase it, but the lifetime is of course in this moment shorter. So that means when you buy strings, high performance strings, they are by nature, this is a natural law, this curve that I have here, they have a shorter lifetime. Because the core materials, all the materials are more stressed. They are made thinner, and then we put the same tension on, then they have a higher stress level. So that's why high performance strings will last shorter than strings which we make for the music schools or for teaching or something like this. So that's a matter of choice. But at the end of the day, you get much more sound here, beauty, brightness, sound than what you have here. I think that was so far. I will just talk shortly about too low tension. Because this is what often happens with fractional instruments. we have the small size of the instruments, and I have 4 daughters, and all played instruments, cello and violin and piano, and they have been so disappointed when they listened to the teacher, huge sound, and they got these tiny instruments, and there was nothing really to compare. And my first product, when I started at Larsen Strings in 2007, and my first product have been the fractional Larsen Strings. I made them for my children. I was myself very disappointed, and you know, as a parent, you do everything for your kids, yes? So, and that's why I bought, Larsen had no fractional at that time, and I said, it can't be true that a little instrument has no voice. It is so tiny and so thin sounding. And then I made this Larsen fractional strings at the time, because when you try it out, it's a huge difference from other strings. They really put power in the instrument without to overpower it. And it has to do with that we usually have too low tension for the fractional strings. I met many teachers, and when I made string optimization and all the old strings, they were in the corner. And when we finished the sessions, they said, oh, I have to remember my old strings, I can give it to my pupils. I said, oh no, come on. Yes, and then they cut a full-length string down and put it on. Yes, and the string is dirty, but they don't care. I was so shocked about to see this, but this is what happens. When a string is broken in a session, the teacher often, I have seen it in Europe, I don't know how it's in Australia, but I was really, no, can't be. So that's why it is very often that we invest so much as teachers in training, bowing technique, and all this Alexander and what is existing there, but we completely forget about teach them about their setup, about quality of strings, about their bridge. The bridge often is so tilted. Yes, this can't work because you lose all the energy. You put so much energy in, but when you have such a bridge, there is so much loss of energy down to the belly, and that's everything. We talk about response. We talk about sauté. It has to speak immediately, but when you have such a bridge, you can't do this because all your energy is lost already on the way. And this is again, we have here the tension, and here are all 4 strings. It's on the cello here, and this is what it is for a full-length instrument. The tension we have there. And when you cut this, when you take this and cut it down to a half size, you end up with a tension here. When you calculate what should be the true relationship in tension, you should be here. And this is exactly what I made at that time for the fractional strings. And then used all materials which make it easy. That means row core for the low strings to make it easy to play, that they are flexible. Because what the kids, they don't have this hard skin, and they don't have the force in the fingers. And what is more frustrating, when the sound is not there, when they have not a clear tone. That's why everything was made to make it easy to play and get down to the fingerboard and have a beautiful warm tone, touching tone. You remember, my children grew up with a Suzuki school, and you have so many with a big beer and all these pieces there. Yes, and it has to sound like this, not metallic, sharp or something. It has to be round and beautiful and touching. This was the first part of my presentation, and now I will go over to talk about response and about tone color and optimization of the sound. Do we have questions so far to this more technical part here? Okay, I go further. The reason why I digged into this problem of response, because it's so crucial for us when we play. I play pianos, it's much easier with a response. So with a bow and with the strings, it's much more complicated. And nothing is more frustrating when the string not speak. Yes, when it's starting with a scratching instead of a clear tone. So that's why, and I was blamed, very often I have seen when the instrument is not responding, that the strings are blamed. So that's why I had to understand what is behind. So, and when we talk about response, is the instrument, is the string, is of course in pianissimo, in flautando, when we have the fast spiccato. So how is the string speaking in this moment? And there are so many opinions about it, that's why I will give some more background for you. And there are so many parameters which are contributing here. One is, for example, when you have a tendency for wolf notes in your instrument, then you struggle with the response as well. Because this is counteracting, the wolf note is counteracting the response of the instrument. But on the other side, you are blessed with the instrument which has evolved because you can work with the sound. It's always, when you are at a higher level, you will be very happy about it. When you are a beginner, you will hate your instrument. Next is, for example, the setup, how you have done it. And here we are at the point. What is the school or the teacher doing to put the right strings on the instrument? How is the balance of forces? Which bridge model and quality? I talked about this banded old bridges we have sometimes. Yes, it depends always what is the economy of the school to take care of the instruments. But in the end of the day, when they don't care, the pupils pay the price and they maybe drop out of of learning the instruments much too early. Maybe they have much more talent, but when the instrument is not in good shape, they spend too much power to overcome it, and it is frustrating in the length. Quality of the fingerboard, how this is done. It has to do with regular maintenance. Then, of course, your bow and your rosin use. How old is a bow here? Look at the sticks they have in the school sometimes. Yes, rosin has a huge impact to the response of the string. And then, of course, the bowing technique, personality, humidity. Now I will go more in detail to some of these points. First is the balance of forces. What is very important? The instrument has to be in a zero condition. That means all forces, when it's good made up, has to be zero. Zero means, in this moment you put energy on the string with a bow. This energy is immediately transformed via the bridge to the belly. When you have any form of stress in your instrument, if you have no balance, you have energy loss. And before this energy comes to the belly, you have to overcome the stress. One example is what I have very often seen. You change the strings, put new strings on. And very rarely people put pencil in the grooves of the bridge and of the upper nut. So when we now put our strings on, then we have tension here at the bridge. Very often we can't see it. But one string is more pulling than the other. So that means the bridge is not free, it is under tension. This means when you put the bow on it and play, the strings will react different. The string where we have tension, you have first to overcome the stress, this tension, and that's why it's a lower response. And usually you should lift up the string, first the pencil in the bridge, lift up the string and then tune it up. That you really assure that there's no tension in the bridge. And what I'm often doing is when I finish putting new strings on, that I make a small rattling, very careful of the bridge to get out of the tension from the strings. You can't move a bridge without this pencil in the grooves, because then they are sticky, then they are really catching to the bridge. But if there is pencil in, then you can move it. One thing. So all the instrument has to be in a zero force condition when it's fine made. The strings, we talked about string tension. String diameter is of course important. As thicker a string is, as lower it is responding. That's why when you have cheaper strings which are made of cheaper materials, they are usually thicker. Don't expect the same response from these strings when you have more expensive strings which are thinner. A thinner string is easier responding. Then the playing in time. A new string needs time. It never vibrated before. So that means don't come with the same claim to the response. You have to give the strings 3 days up to a week before they really have settled. And then you can claim everything about the response. In the first beginning, and what I'm doing is when I put new strings on instrument, I stretch the strings with, it's cotton, and I go below. Do we have an instrument? I take one. What I'm doing is, sorry, I just take some here. What I'm doing is, and I do it for all instruments, it's the same. Important, pencil here, pencil there, that everything can move. And then I have a piece of cotton and I go below of the string, and then, this is sticky, I stretch it like this. I pull the string away without pressing. My thumb is only on top without pressing, and then I stretch the string like this. And then I tune again. And then again the stretching. I do it 3 times. And very often when you have a concert or something and the string is broken or something like this, that's the best way to have it fast played in, because what I'm doing is I reduce this stretching when the string is new. And you get much faster this true voice of the string in comparison when you just put on and wait. Next. Yes, then it's very important that you have, when we talk about string elasticity, stiffness of a string or resistance of the string. This is your bowing technique. When you buy, for example, when you are used to strings which are rather stiff, high resistance, and then you buy the canone from Larsen Strings, they are much more flexible. You will struggle because you will miss this resistance to the string, and you will observe it as a lower response and all that stuff. I had once a situation with a young student from, it was in Kromek at the academy, a very high talent student from Japan. And he used to have this high tension strings, very stiff. And I put the canone on and he said, they don't work. No response, they are bad strings. And I was so much wondering because I tried these strings so often before. There was a young lady in the room from France and she said, can I try the violin? She took the violin and she began to play. It was just beautiful. Nothing to claim it was. She could play immediately on it. And then she explained she was used to gut strings. And I am as well, I would never say our strings are like gut strings, but I like very much this idea of flexibility of long bows. So that you really, but when you play louder, you use the bow velocity and not to put more bow weight on. Yes? So it's philosophy which is behind. But she was used to gut strings, she could immediately play on our strings. And after talking to the Japanese student, it took him 15 minutes and he had adapted. But the first perception was because he was used to some very different approach, and it was not that he had bad bowing technique, not at all, it's just where you come from, what is your teacher? Yes, so that's why it is, you have always to consider when you buy new strings, go for something which is either similar from the resistance, or you search for some new colors, because usually stiff strings makes the sound more like this, more dense, more tight, more forwarded, more focused. When you have more flexible strings, they get broader, and you have more air, more cloud around the sound. And this is of course a matter of taste, and it is important, what is your violin? When your violin is very warm, you need strings which bundle the sound. Yes, but when you have most instruments, they miss the warmth, they lack warmth. They lack this three-dimensional sound. Very often the sound is very flat, it's just on top of the instrument. Yes, and this has to do because everything is too stiff. When you put more flexible strings on, suddenly you dig in the sound, and the sound has to come out of the instrument, not from the surface. And then of course the contact point and the string condition. And here I will talk a little bit about cleaning of strings, because this is overseen. Many musicians have claimed to me about too short lifetime of our strings. I heard this so often. But what nobody has done, it's very rarely that people clean their strings, especially the students. Because it's so important that you clean regular strings. Always when you feel the sound, the overtones are dismissing, they are sounding tired. You need to clean your strings. And what I'm doing is, I have again my cotton piece, I use alcohol. And then you have to cover your violin. I have such a big piece of cotton in I have to show. Mm-hmm. Look, for the violin, I have such a close, and I put it on the violin because the varnish may never be in contact with the alcohol. Fingerboard no risk, but the varnish is very sensitive to alcohol. So you have to be very careful. For the cello, I recommend that the A string, never remove the A string from the instrument. This is the most sensitive one. It has to stay. You have to clean from the pack side to the bridge. Yes, always only in one direction. It's all it's the colophony, it's from your fingers it does. And for our strings, at least I know this, they are a little open when you had put them on the instrument. So there are small openings in these windings, some cavities. And there you put all the dirt inside. And this is very clear, it will damp the sound with it after time. And when you clean the strings just on the instrument, you never clean these cavities. So you have to remove to open up. What I do with the lower strings, either you lower the strings that you can clean above the bridge. It's very important that you clean above the bridge, over the bridge, away. Otherwise, what you can do with the cello, and I do it as well for the violin strings, only for the G and D, that I remove the strings from the instrument. And then I clean away from the instrument and then mount again. And you will be very surprised. All this, what you missed, the overtones, everything will be back. Yes, so you get a nearly new string. And I had so many musicians on the internet, they wrote, I like the sound of the Larsen Strings, but after half a year they were run out, I had to throw away. And I was thinking, he had just to clean the strings, come on. Yes, and when I was to these festivals and the students came to me, and you know, they awaited get new strings. So, because always when you test with me, I have nothing to do with money, I'm the developer. So you keep your strings when it fits afterwards. And they were all new strings today. And I took just my towel, put some alcohol on and cleaned the strings. Big disappointment in the early beginning. But when they began to play, big eyes. It was such a surprise. And it's not something I learned it from a cellist, from a very famous cellist, because I met him for new optimization. We meet once a year, and he said, no reason for me to change. I changed the A string, of course, because there's a shorter lifetime. We are back to this lifetime problem. A string has the highest tension, that means shortest lifetime. But for the lower ones, no change. 2 years he played on the strings. I couldn't believe it. But it is cleaning. Everything is about cleaning. There is a point when the string is burned out. You will feel, at the time, the body is missing. But the brilliance, the brightness, the overtones, they come back again when you clean the strings. Try it out. Try it out on the strings, especially of the cubas. Because these strings never have been cleaned. So it's so important. You will be so surprised what comes back sound-wise on these instruments. So. Great. Okay, and we have a cleaning procedure on our homepage. You can download. There is a complete description how you should do it and for which strings it fits, and also you can download from our Larsen Strings homepage. And I was asked after I made it, I tell about it in all my presentations, and people ask me, come on, you don't sell anymore your strings. But problem is, the most important thing is that you have customers which are satisfied. It is not about how often we sell. It's much more important that you have customers which are happy about the strings. They come back. When you have bought the Canone cello strings for this high price and they last for you, for your feeling, a half a year, you will not buy again. So that's why it's much better the opposite way around. And for the violin, the E string is not sensitive at all. You can remove, you can put it on, but the A is very sensitive. Because it's wrapped with the aluminium, I have shown on the picture, don't remove it, clean on the instrument. Cover it, clean there. A is sensitive. I usually only take the lower ones. On the viola I make exactly the same. I keep the A and D string and only remove the C and G. Then of course we have this, when we talk about response, it's everything it has a lot to do with the bowing and with the quality of your bow. The bow hair, the tension of the bow hair, the rosin used. Again, what I talked about, the effective bow weight, what we are using. This is not you are the specialist, that's why no reason for me to talk about it. But what is much more important is humidity. Because humidity has such a huge impact to the response of our instruments. And when we have high humidity, and we have the very low humidity usually during winter time when we have heating in our flats or as well in the concert halls. Let's start with a high humidity. When you have here when we have our violin, the back of the, it's typical, it is marble. It takes much more water up than the belly because it has a natural rosin inside. So you have a swelling of this side more than you have on this side. So what happens if this is swelling, the neck is going up. Yes? So at this change, of course, your position on the fingerboard. So you suddenly, when it's very humid, and you get this, the distance of the strings to the fingerboard is increasing. And when it's very horrible, I met once a cellist. He had to play solo pieces, and he had really nearly destroyed his fingers because he was not recognizing that it was the distance of the strings to the fingerboard was increased so dramatical that he nearly destroyed his fingers because he was only focusing on his concert. And he said, something is wrong with my setup, I don't know what it is, but I have to work much harder than usually. It was humidity. So this is very difficult. It is more damping the sound, the wood is getting more heavy, this is damping, and what we are dismissing are the high overtones. What I recommend in this situation, when you have a concert, which is very important, then you have to use more bright strings, especially on the upper register, when you work with very high humidity. I once had this situation, I visited the Elbphilharmonie Orchestra in Hamburg, and we changed strings. I had very new prototypes, I was excited, they have been excited, everything was new. And then they went to China for concerts. And suddenly the solo cellist was calling me, he said, your strings are completely wrong. And all have problems with the response and they don't work anymore and we have huge trouble here in China with your strings now. I was completely, what happens? They came back from China, I went to Hamburg and looked at what could be. And there was one cellist. He was not on this travel. He stayed in Hamburg and he was sitting beside and he said, I don't know what is the problem. I had no problem all the time. They worked so well, I'm completely happy. And then I learned humidity because it was very humid in south of China. And this is exactly this problem. And of course, you have a bad response of the strings in this moment. Low humidity, it's the opposite. It's what we have in wintertime. And the problem is, again, we have this change. We have a shrinking of the marble back. And this means that the neck position goes down, and that means we get too close to the fingerboard with the strings. We get suddenly rattling of the strings on the fingerboard. And the other problem is that the wood is getting higher in strength. Here you have the humidity, and this is the strength of the wood. And as lower my humidity gets, as higher is the strength. So that means the wood is getting stronger. What we suddenly dismiss is a warm sound. These bigger vibrations are disappearing. Everything is getting hard and sound. Not longer this beautiful sound what we have. And again, the response is going down. Of course, when the wood is harder, it doesn't react so fast. That's why it's so important that you take care of your instrument, have it in a certain stable humidity at home. Yes, for the piano it's easy. I have something below my piano to have my soundboard stable over the whole year, which is heating and giving humidity. But it's much more difficult for your instruments. What I can recommend is, that's my experience, that you put, I don't like these rubber pieces you put inside, but what I do is put your violin in your bag, in the case, yes. Put a towel of silk on first, and then you put a second towel on. And on this second towel, you make such a pure water. You spread some pure water. It has to be very pure water on the second, outside first, yes. And then you put it on and close the case, because then you have a very uniform humidity distribution inside. Control it. That is when you don't have anything else. Because with it, I use as well in our shop, we have this rubber pieces. I don't know yes, this humidifier, but they often drop, and it is a little bit more complicated. When you do it like this, it's uniform over the instrument, but you have to take care about the instruments. As well, you get stress in the wood when it's too dry. So much to load humidity. And again, we have this, what I said, for the cellist, we talk about the winter bridge, which is higher, to get the position of the strings up again. loudness. This is again this understanding what means loudness. Because many students I meet, and they should be educated, they really feel bow weight is the only solution. But bow weight already has a very special sound. It's already intense. So it's bow velocity. That's the most common to get more volume out is velocity in the bow. And then of course you have the possibility how far away you go from the bridge and how close you go to the bridge. This again adds volume to the sound. And when you add more bow weight, what is very common, what I have very often seen for the students, when they want to play louder, the problem is that they get a more edgy sound. So the sound is getting more intense by using more bow weight. And intense is already a tone color. And when the composer is asking for more volume, he's not asking for a more intense sound. This is already when you put articulation in. That's why it's very dangerous only to when students only work with a bow weight and short bow. They have really to understand this. It's a long bow, not the weight, to increase. And then of course the string tension, what we talked about it. Sound color. Is it too fast for you or is it great? Thank you. Sound color, here you have the output, the sound pressure. These are our harmonics and these are the frequencies down here. And this is what you can see here, it's for a cello A string. Yes, we have the fundamental frequency at 220 Hertz. First octave, fifth, second octave, the development of these harmonics. And this is what we when we speak about sound color, it is how many harmonics do I have and how is the contribution of any of the harmonics, what is the sound pressure any, to the sound. This forms the sound color. And we change it. I tried like this. Here again we have, this is the frequency. The lower frequencies, the fundamentals, that's the lower harmonics, and here's the higher harmonics. This is the sound pressure again for the single ones. And then, depending how we form the sound, but as well depending on our instrument and the strings we used, we can have a warm sound. This is warm, the dark blue here. And when we reduce the lower harmonics, then we get a transparent sound. And when we go to the other opposite side, here the white one, you can see it's lower and the fundaments lower and the lower, but very high in the harmonics. It's a very edgy sound. And this edgy sound is what you generate when you use very high bow weight, especially when you do it close to the bridge. It's very intense, but this is just a color. It's not, loud is very different to color. So you have always to be care about color. And now we get back to the strings, because what you can do is, you can define the sound of your violin, of your instrument. The violin is born with some sound. You can't change it. It is the instrument how it was built. But you can form and change the sound depending on the strings you use. There are warm sounding strings, because all our strings, let's go back, this one, all our strings are made with an own voice. And this is what I do in my development. I design the strings that they have a voice. And this is, for example, we have the canon cello strings for the violin as well. And we have a warm and broad sound, and we have a dark and focused sound. All what I do is by designing the strings with different materials to give them their own voice. And it's your task to think about what is the instrument, the voice of my own instrument. What is my taste? What would I like to have in sound? And then you have to find the right combination. When you have a very bright sounding instrument, you need warmth. You need body in the sound. So then you go for a warmer and broader kind of strings, which can be, there are many different suppliers for warmer sound. For example, the Obligato or the Zigan from our side, they have a warmer sound. So you have to make your choice depending on what your instrument is and what is your taste. If you like a very bright sound, then you go, of course, for the bright sound. As I said, any string has its own spectrum and it has to go together with the instrument. And when we now look for the violin strings, for example, we have the strings with a traditional polyamide or nylon core. This is the most famous is dominant. They have been the first commercial products with a nylon core. They usually have a warmer, neutral to warm sound. It depends. They can be very neutral, but they can be very warm. For example, from our side, the Zwieg, which is there, is very warm. It's the warmest setup I know, string-wise. But generally, these strings are used for to reach a warmer sound. Very good for students because for the pupils, because they are most attracted in the beginning when it's warm, when it's beautiful, when they use a bow and it sounds beautiful. In opposite, when we go for a more clear sound, for a more a brighter sound, we have this what we call peak core. And this is what I just mentioned. Zweig, for example, the obbligato is famous, all the evaporazio, perpetual line, visions, the rondo, and then from Larsen Strings, the canon and the Larsen virtuoso. They have this more clear voice and a more bright voice. Again, this is not just one language, not just one voice. It can be from a warm sound. Virtuoso, for example, Larsen virtuoso is warm, but has a clarity, has some transparency in sound. The other one before, the Zwieg, is saturated warmth. This is a transparent warmth. I prefer the virtuoso because it's singing, it's a more free voice, but this is matter of taste. So when you have to think about the instrument of your pupils or your own, and then to think what could be best. When you try to think about what is the instrument voice, what is the pupil doing, what is their taste, and how can I, let's say, improve this? Yes, I said always it can be warm. For example, the obbligato is more on the warm side. Evaporazio is much more on the bright side. Yes, and we recommend this for these darker instruments, neutral to dark sounding instruments, to brighten up, to make it especially more transparent, more clear in sound. And then what I said already with the core material, this is a more dense, a more focused sound, this is a wider sound, this is a wider sound. The core material again has a huge influence to the sound color. And finally again, when you look, when we make the design of the strings, we have an idea behind. It's not just putting new strings on the market. This is boring. There's always an idea. And when we start here from the very warm side, we have the Zwieg, it's warm and saturated. And then we go original, aurora, virtuoso, il canone to the dark and focus. This is the bright side. And this is exactly that all colors are available and you have just to choose the right match to what you like, what is good for the instrument you have in your hands. So there's nothing, that's very important. There's nothing better or worse. It's always about the optimum to find the best strings for my setup and for my personal taste. And the same we have for the cello line. You have the Larsen original, which is actually the warmest cello A string on the market, and then it can go up to our arioso strings. Camille is playing the arioso strings, for example, and this is a more bright side. But when you have a cello which has a warmth, then you can exactly make this adjustment. That was all from my side. I hope it was not boring. For me, it's important that you get more, that you are more open for experiment with the strings. That you not just rely on this what we had all our life and we stay on. It is about to make the best fit out of this. It is really when you make so much effort for your pupils. And we all have the interest that they grow and they stay as long as possible. I mean, not anyone can be a soloist or play in the orchestra, but when they learn to make chamber music together, when they keep this for their whole life, it's the best what we can do for the children. But we have a contribution, and this is that we give them the right stuff, that they can grow, that they have joy to make it, that they learn to have joy with the music. That's in principle all what it is about. That's all our work in the end. Yes? So, and you are always welcome if you have any questions and you have an instrument and I have this trouble, this challenge, write to us. Use all the channels to get support from our side.